Now that we understand the theory behind the AI perception system, it's time to implement it into our own project. We will start by adding the perception component to our AI and configuring our first sense, sight. Next, we will flag our player character, something that we would like the AI to perceive. We will do this by adding a stimuli source to the character. By the end of this video, we will have both the player and AI characters configured, generating events from the perception system ready for us to use in the next section. We'll begin by setting up the AI perception on the AI character. Select AIC _ third person character in the content browser and double-click to open the blueprint editor. Move to the Components panel in the top left-hand corner and select Add Component. Begin typing AI Perception until it can be seen in the drop-down and press Enter to add it. Select it in the Components panel and move over to the right-hand side to the Details panel. In the Details panel, in the AI Perception rollout, look at the Senses config. We can see that currently this is an empty array. This means by default, no senses are configured and the AI won't have any. Let's resolve that by adding an element to the array by pressing the plus icon. Now, from within that element and the drop-down, select AI Sight config. Now our AI has one sense configured. Expand this rollout and expand the senses rollout below to look at the full details of the sight config. The sight radius defines the maximum sight distance that the AI could perceive a target, whereas the lose sight radius defines the maximum sight distance they can see a target that has already been seen. If that seems a little bit confusing, don't worry, it's much clearer in context and we'll see that later on in the course. Below that, we have the peripheral vision half angle degrees. While this is an incredibly long name, its purpose is actually quite simple, and it defines the cone of the AI vision relative to the forward vector of the AI itself. Next, we need to expand the detection by affiliation rollout. Note, because this course is exclusively Blueprint, we have no way to define enemies, neutrals, or friendlies. Our workaround for this is simply to enable the Detect Neutrals option. By default, everything in the game is neutral, and this means when we later configure our player, it will be correctly detected as a neutral. The only other important option here is the max age. All the age options relate to how long ago something was last seen. While we won't actually make use of this during the course, it's something you'll see a lot, so I think it's worth you know what it actually refers to. And with that, we've configured everything we need to for the sight sense on the AI character. The only thing left to do is press F7 or hit the compile button in the toolbar to ensure that everything builds correctly, and then we can close this blueprint. Next, we need to mark our player character as a stimuli source, so that the AI will actually be able to perceive them within the world. Begin by selecting a third-person character from the content browser and double-clicking to open the blueprint editor. From here, move to the Components panel in the top left corner and click the Add Component button. Begin typing AI Perception Stimuli Source until it is visible in the list, and then select it to add the component. With the component added, select it in the panel and move over to the Details panel on the right-hand side. In the AI Perception rollout, check Auto Register as Source. Now we just need to make sure it's registered for the correct sense on the AI. So we will add an element to the Register as Source for Senses array. Click the plus button to add an element, and from the drop-down select AI Sense Sight. And that's actually all we need to do to the third-person character. So we'll press F7 or hit the compile button in the toolbar to ensure that the blueprint compiles properly before closing it and returning to the main editor window. We have laid the groundwork for our AI perception system. We added an AI perception component to the AI character, which holds all of our sense information. We then added a sight sense and adjusted it to suit our needs. We then went on to add an AI perception stimuli source to our player character and configured it to register as a source for our newly created sight sense.